become a labor of love. There are so many people involved. I would especially like to thank the Marion Center for actually starting the whole ball of wax running, providing wonderful support with their website and newsletter, as well as the prayer cards you hopefully received on your way in the door. Also to Pam's Speech and the Catholic Shop, giveaway to Pam, for getting the word out, printing countless flyers, email blasts, and generally keeping me in line, which is not easy. And she also donated a little statue of the Theotokos that we'll be seeing a little later on. Also, to Monsignor Yannick and St. Daniel's Community for hosting us. What I'd like to cover today, from the vantage point of a tourist and also of a pilgrim, how I turned up in Ephesus. You know, this talk originated as Regina and I were talking, and she said, I don't know that many people that have been to Ephesus. And that's all it took. And I have a feeling Regina is not going to make any more suggestions after this.
It's a labor of love.
It's a labor. So how did I turn up there? How did Mary turn up in Ephesus? Who else turned up in Ephesus? And while we're at it, what in blazes is Ephesus? You know, if you say it enough, it starts to sound like a sinus condition, and or your teeth feel funny. You know, so, and I've been practicing this. We're also going to talk about the discovery of Mary's house and her last years, and then kind of transition a little bit into the Council of Ephesus and how we get to the concept of Mary as Theotokos. And finally, wrap up. My next thing, I love questions. If you know anything about me, I love questions. And we have index cards on the table. If questions occur to you as we go, I would encourage you to write down your question. Please print legibly. And toward the end, we'll see how many we can get to. Fair enough? So that's a pretty full agenda. Well, what do you say we start with a prayer? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
It is truly right to bless you, O Theotokos,
ever blessed and most pure, and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without defilement, you gave birth to God the Word.
True Theotokos, we magnify you. Please keep these handy. We'll refer back to them. And also please know that they are yours to take with you, and they've been blessed. Okay, turning up in Ephesus. Back in my 30s, I made a conscious decision to start traveling. While I had the wherewithal, I'm drawn to history, I love languages, I love being able to experience other cultures. And over the course of time, my travels have taken on the sense of a pilgrimage. And I always have the sense of my guardian angel at my side. And I have to say, in all the years I've traveled in the countries I've been to, only twice that I can think of have I ever feared for my own personal safety. Now, that I almost got into a fight in Jerusalem was my own doing. So I wanted to go to Greece. So in May 2007, I flew somewhere 4,937 miles from New York over to Athens. Can you all see the little red dot? Mm-hmm. You know what? Yeah. It drove my cats crazy when I first. Yeah. Okay. This was a non-stop 11.5-hour flight on the national Greek airline Olympic. What a lovely time of year to go before the crush of the tourist season. Pardon me. I'd never been in the Mediterranean, and I'm happy to tell you it was not oppressively hot, but the noonday sun could be intense. So I spent 3 days tooling around Athens, mostly on my own, Couple of surprises, in my opinion, it's the worst traffic in the world. And McDonald's restaurants are not open for breakfast. I spent quite a bit of time at the National Archaeological Museum of Greece. Fascinating. Of course, saw the Acropolis and the Parthenon. And spent some time in the Plaka district. If any of you have been to Athens, it's a delightful section of town with all sorts of shops, and cafes, and everything for souvenirs to get you to spend your money. Then after those 3 days, I joined up with a tour group for a 3-day cruise among the Greek islands on the Aegean Sea. Now, I'd never been on a cruise before, and I was apprehensive, and a friend of mine says, well, Carol, you know, the Greeks have been doing this for thousands of years. They've had a little time to practice. Bear with me here. I have no problem flying 35,000 feet for 11 and a half hours, but sailing on the ocean was a bit of a different matter. Okay, so we set out from the Greek port of Piraeus. Our first stop was Mykonos, which, as I understand it, is home to the best of the best sea captains and navigators. Then we went on down to Rhodes. And you guys all see Rhodes? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the thing that fascinated me the most here was a wonderful medieval fortress that had been built by the Knights of St. John to repel the invading Turks. We're talking 30-foot thick walls. I mean, not, you know, they didn't have cranes and electricity and stuff. 30 feet thick, and you can still see the cannonballs embedded in some of them. Medieval cobblestone streets, and I gotta tell you, you know, even with the best shoes, it's hard on the soles of your feet walking on those darn things. From Rhodes, we went to Patmos, which you may know, of course, St. John spent 2 years here in exile under the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian. This is where he wrote the book of Revelation. What am I forgetting? I want to say it's a little speck of a volcanic island. You want to exile somebody, Patmos is a good place. We got there very, very early on a Sunday morning, and I remember seeing the sunrise come up over pine trees of all things. And looking out on the water. The Aegean is so incredibly blue and beautiful. And just kind of envisioning him a few feet offshore baptizing people. We saw the grotto cave where he lived and had the visions of the Lord in Revelation. I'm getting myself all out of order. Do you mind if I go back to Rhodes for a minute?
No, go ahead.
I wanted to say, besides the medieval fortress, Rhodes was home to one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, namely the Colossus of Rhodes, which is no longer there. Okay. You know what the problem is walking and chewing gum at the same time. I have this, and I have this, and I don't have anything to turn pages with. You need to practice that next time. One other thing about Patmos, there's a magnificent monastery there that was built by the monks in the year 1088 AD. Of course, this is Greek Orthodox, as ornate as they come, but underneath it was a museum/treasury. And I'll never forget walking in and just inside, looking right here, a painting by El Greco of the Man of Sorrows, Jesus as the Man of Sorrows. I can still see that. How poignant that was. Okay, I'm turning the page almost now. From Patmos. No.
Oh.
From Patmos, we went on to Ephesus, Turkey, which was over here. And actually, this was our first mainland view of Asia. This is the port of Kuşadası, Turkey. Kush being bird, Ada being the sea. The name was changed from Ephesus to Kuşadası in the early 20th century. Okay, what is Ephesus? We cannot really answer that without first asking and answering what was Ephesus. This was an ancient coastal city in Asia Minor at the extreme end of the Roman territory, which you saw kind of way in the back to the right of the map. It was the third largest city in the known world, that is the Roman Empire, with a population of more than 350,000 people. Conquered by Alexander the Great in 334 BC, came under Roman rule a century later. For us, in the New Testament, it was one of the cities where St. Paul spent quite a bit of time nurturing an early Christian community, and it is also the name of one of the 7 ancient churches mentioned in the book of Revelation. What is Ephesus today? Well, over the centuries, the ancient harbor filled in with silt, and today the site is approximately 6 miles inland. And what you'll find there is a breathtaking composite of ancient ruins commensurate with everything you'd expect about a lively, thriving commercial center. Okay, we're going to start here with Hadrian's Arch. Look at the weather we had. Not a cloud in the sky. Hadrian was a Roman emperor from 117 to 138 AD. He was one of the 5 good emperors, unlike Nero and Caligula. And I just marvel at the astounding exploits of this man. From Hadrian's Wall in the north of England, he built a wall from one coast of England to the other, 73 miles long, at the border of Scotland and England, to the arch here. And it seems everywhere in between, I've seen evidence of this guy. Do you remember the old game, Where's Waldo? Well, forget Waldo. Where's Hadrian? Next one is the street. This was Main Street, Ephesus, sort of like our Broadway today. There used to be ancient shops, probably a brothel or 2. There was that temple. Everything that those 350,000 plus people would need. I want to point out to you, this road leads us down over there, which we'll see in a moment, the Library of Ephesus. But these stones and columns are original to the site. They're what we call in situ, which is to say in their original place. Okay. This is the Library of Ephesus. Actually, it's a restored facade of what it was, and this is probably the most famous picture you'll ever see in a travel brochure. This was the Celsus Library, built in 114 AD and named for a Roman governor. Remarkably, this is a public library designed to hold 12,000 scrolls. Not books, but scrolls. It was destroyed in 262 AD by earthquake and fire, which may have been arson. Here, that main street we saw a minute ago connects with the ancient amphitheater of Ephesus. This was built to accommodate 25,000 spectators. They brought their own cushions. This was the scene of a riot against St. Paul. And you know what? To this day, when I see that picture, I wonder how in the blazes they could hear. You know, not one of these, you know. How did they do that? Okay, so we're leaving the site of Ephesus itself and we're heading inland. This is Nightingale Mountain. I took a tour bus, climbing. What I want to point out to you, besides this being en route to Mary's house, this is an example of terraced farming, which is one of the best ways to make use of limited agricultural resources. And the day we were there, we did see peasants tilling the fields. After a long, steady climb in that bus, we reached a beautiful parking area. And as soon as you stepped off the bus, there was such a prevailing, peaceful and tranquil atmosphere. You stepped off the bus and it connected with a little pedestrian thoroughfare, little street, lined with a couple of cafes, souvenir shops. This was the street that you were going to walk on that would bring you to Mary's house. A lovely wooded setting. It was a delightful, sweet atmosphere, and people of many faiths come here. This is the outdoor altar that, again, you encounter before you reach Mary's house. This was completed in 1979 in time for Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, to say Mass. Okay. This, you know what? This is the part of the presentation I've actually lost sleep over. And the top of my note says the giant capital upside down L. This is a simplistic floor plan of Mary's house shown approximate to size. As it stands today, it reminds me of an upside down capital L. This would have been, 50 feet long, 20 feet across, and this little section over here, 12 by 12, would have been Mary's bedroom, with a small semicircular apse at the end. The most difficult part of this has been trying to show you the house in a couple ways. Okay, Vanna.
I thought her name was Visual.
Yeah. We made a little model of a giant capital L. Okay? And we're going to take it and we're going to do this. And we're going to do this because, as we'll hear later, originally it was a T, capital T. There was a closet across from Mary's room. You can hold your applause. Now, we've gone so far as to actually measure this out for you, and I had the Pope helping me here. From the Pope to this sanctuary light is 20 feet across. So those of you who are in here are sitting in Mary's house, so behave yourselves. From the wall behind me to those of you in the back, you two ladies in the back, and on out to Court Street is 50 feet. Okay? And then from this sanctuary light to just beyond that column is 12 feet, Mary's bedroom. Okay. Bear with me just a second. Okay, finally we come to the entrance to Mary's house. This is sort of the bottom of that upside down L. Again, in a lovely wooded setting. Look at the day we had. Look how peaceful the pilgrims are. I took this picture because I thought this tree was obnoxious. But you know what? The tree actually marks the place where the house makes a right angle. Okay? This is where you're going from the main part of the house over to Mary's bedroom. Okay. Now, have I totally confused everybody? Are you sitting there wondering how I can find my way out of a paper sack, let alone travel around the world? Well, let's come back inside for a minute. Look at the wolf here. Okay, Vanna. This is the far end. This is the semicircular apse that ends in an altar. Pardon me for walking in front of that. And this is what your eyes are drawn to from the minute you walk in. So here, on our diagram, we have the altar. And it's supposed to stay put. Now, when I was going there, you know, you make your way steadily. There was a group ahead of me praying together with a priest, and I listened, and they were speaking English. They were reciting the Hail, Holy Queen. And I was able to join in, and they moved on, and I was able to have a few minutes in front of the altar, and it just sends goosebumps. Notice the Easter candle, and notice the light coming from above. Just lovely, isn't it? Do you feel like you were there? I hope. Okay, we're still at it. We're still at it. This is a more detailed diagram, again, to kind of give you a sense of those dimensions. At the bottom is the entrance. Now, as I made my way in, I'm showing you an entryway there which measured about 8 feet across by 4 feet. What struck me immediately as I walked in were canes and crutches suspended from the ceiling in testament to cures. Going further in, right here, about right here, was a votive candle stand, one of those old vintage ones with sand, and the candles were long tapers, a dark honey-colored wax. I always light one and say a prayer for my family. I was struck by the narrowness and the simplicity of the room and a quiet reverence. And I want to tell you that if you were to keep going on this road past Mary's house, it sort of makes a hairpin turn, like you're going back to the parking lot, and you're going down at an angle. And there's a natural spring that's been there for centuries. Okay, we're going to pivot a little bit and go back through the eyes of the pilgrim. How did Mary turn up in Ephesus? Carol, where are you? Carol, do you have enough light? Want to come up here? Please read for us.
This is a reading from the Gospel of John. It's chapter 19, verse 25. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Seeing his mother and the disciple he loved standing near her, Jesus said to his mother, "Woman, this is your son." Then to the disciple he said, "This is your mother." And from that moment, the disciple made a place for her in his home.
Thank you. Okay, we are indebted to the Marian mystics for filling in a lot of the gaps, things that scriptures do not tell us. Within a few years after Jesus' ascension, persecution of the new church broke out with the stoning of St. Stephen in 36 AD. This was followed by the martyrdom of St. James the Apostle, as in Peter, James, and John, who had been Bishop of Jerusalem, first Bishop of Jerusalem, and St. Peter's arrest. So all of this became the catalyst for the apostles to start going forth and making disciples of all nations. Here we have a map of the Roman Empire in 117 AD, And I have this here in part to show you the sweep of the Roman Empire. You're going from, we call it today, England, down to the north of Africa, over into Asia Minor, almost most of Europe. Judea is over here. Jerusalem is that little spot, and oddly enough, on this map, they have it by its Greek name, which I'm not going to try to... Does anybody know how to say it in Greek? All right, I'm sorry, but it's Greek to me. We'll just leave it at Jerusalem. All right, so this is where they start out. Of course, St. Peter goes to Rome. St. Paul is in Greece on his missionary journeys as the apostle to the Gentile. They both die in Rome on the same day, a martyr's death. Well, fearing for Mary's safety, in light of what's going on, John fled with her from Jerusalem over to Ephesus. Somewhere. Jerusalem to Ephesus. That would be 541 nautical miles if you did it by land, or about 600 miles if you did it, by sea, or about 600 miles if you did it by land. I don't know. I would imagine they did it by sea. Okay, who else turned up in Ephesus? Well, certainly St. Paul and St. Luke with him, who of course gave us the Acts of the Apostles. St. Mary Magdalene followed the Blessed Mother there. She died and was buried in Ephesus. Also, of course, St. John, the beloved disciple. And members of an early Christian community. They lived at about a quarter hour removed from each other. Their homes were a quarter hour removed from each other on purpose. So a small little community. Okay, the discovery of Mary's house. No conversation about this would be complete without mention of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. She was a German-born mystic, stigmatist, visionary, and prophet. She belonged to the order of St. Augustine in Germany until that order was suppressed by the ruler of Germany at that time. She was born September 8th, 1774, and who else do we know was born September 8th? She died February 9th, 1824. She was beatified by St. John Paul on October 3rd, 2004, and she received the visible stigmata, especially the crown of thorns, in 1798. This is the picture you see of her most often. I want to point out, she's not a religious at this point. The convent has been closed. This is not a religious headdress so much as her head is bandaged because of the crown of thorns stigmata. Now, due to rumors after her death that her body had been stolen, they exhumed her remains, this is 6 weeks later, and found that she was incorrupt.